The biggest part about being food insecure when you're little is that you don't really realize you're food insecure. All I knew is that sometimes at the end of the month we would struggle with food, or we would always be looking for like food specials in our community.
When I was an undergrad, I didn't know that there were resources available to students, so I just really struggled, and I worked 3 waitressing jobs just to get myself through. And I remember just like hoping that they would give us free food at the end of the night.
There are often times that I would go without eating so my children could eat. I wanted to make sure that they got their stomachs full, and I didn't want them to experience hunger.
I still can't waste food. It makes me feel uncomfortable. That has never changed for me because I grew up food insecure.
When we talk about ending hunger, we're really talking about ending food insecurity. When someone is food insecure, it means they don't have the resources to purchase the quantity or quality of food they need to live a healthy life. Physical hunger comes and goes depending on the time of day, while food insecurity is an economic condition that requires strategic solutions. You experience food security if your food supply is consistently nutritious, affordable, physically accessible, and culturally appropriate. Physically accessible means you don't have to travel far to get food, up to 1 mile in the city or 10 miles in the country. And frozen turkey donated to a neighborhood food pantry may be nutritious, affordable, and close to home, but if you don't eat meat for religious reasons, it fails the culturally appropriate test. When one or more of these factors impacts the quality or quantity of food you consume, you are considered food insecure. In 2018, about 11% of the U.S. was food insecure. Food insecurity is higher in some geographic areas than others, and some populations are at a higher risk for food insecurity. Any number of food insecure people is too many. But why is food security out of reach for so many people?
I grew up in East Los Angeles, and the thing about growing up in East LA is everybody is a Latino, recent immigrant, so we all feel kind of the same level of poor. A lot of what has laid out where my family ended up in the US was due to historical racism.
There was a period of maybe 6 years that we moved every year to find low-income housing or housing that I really could afford so that I could make sure that I could feed the kids, pay utilities, and everything else, because of course the rent eats first.
One reason why people are food insecure is because they cannot afford sufficient food to eat. Low household income and wealth are big factors. When faced with an unexpected medical bill, car repair, or other expense, many people reduce spending on groceries or cut spending on food altogether. Let's look at 3 causes of low household income and wealth: racism, low wages, and housing costs. Racism goes beyond bigotry and individual intolerance. Slavery, segregation, broken treaties, exclusionary hiring, redlining, and many more policies have privileged the wealth of white people at the expense of people of color, especially Black and Hispanic people. Over generations, these policies have created a racial wealth gap, leaving households of color with smaller personal safety nets and therefore at a greater risk of food insecurity. Nearly half of U.S. workers are employed at low-wage jobs, many of which are part-time or seasonal. These workers provide essential services, but their wages don't cover basic needs, and opportunities for advancement are limited. Most new jobs created today are low-wage jobs. And finally, housing. In 2018, there was no county in the U.S. where a minimum wage worker could afford a 1-bedroom apartment and cover all other essential expenses, like health care or transportation. Too many are forced to decide between rent and food. Until these problems are fully addressed, people will continue to experience food insecurity across the country.
My family relied on WIC. It was a benefit that we received. We didn't understand that it was a government-funded subsidy.
I was on SNAP when I first moved to DC 2 years ago, and I will say that it helped tremendously. I was living on such a low income at the time that I really don't know how I would have eaten.
My favorite memories were of summer meals and going to the park in the summers. We'd line up, we'd get our meal, and after our meal, my mom would just let us run around. She was so happy because we all got fed and none of us had to worry about food that day.
We need to address societal problems like racism, low wages, and high housing costs to solve food insecurity. But even as we do, people need solutions to help them feed their families today. That's why the Federal Nutrition Safety Net is one of the most efficient short-term solutions to food insecurity we have. Here are 3 of the most used programs that keep food on the table for millions in the U.S. SNAP is the largest federal nutrition program. SNAP benefits let people select and purchase food at grocery stores and, in some states, online. SNAP also stimulates local economies with in-store purchases. SNAP benefits are calculated based on income and household size, and on average provide an extra $102 a week for a family of 4. WIC is a program specifically for women, infants, and young children. WIC provides funds for food and additional services for nutrition education and breastfeeding. Proper nutrition for the first 1,000 days of a child's life is extremely important for that child's future development. And progress that is lost due to malnutrition during the first 1,000 days cannot be made up later. Then there are the child nutrition programs, including school lunch, school breakfast, and summer meals. When children have enough to eat, they can concentrate in class and even improve their test scores. Programs like these are some of the best ways we have of tackling food insecurity in the short term, but we can make them even better.
My advocacy really started in college. I just didn't understand how our professors could talk about hunger and poverty and not see that it was right outside the door.
I just try to encourage people to not be ashamed of what they've gone through, because it took me a really, really long time to be able to talk about it.
I have something to say and I need to say it because it's going to make it better for myself, my children, my children's children. All begins with just speaking up and speaking the truth to what all of our experiences are.
We can make the safety net better, but it takes everyone's voice. A stronger safety net means that when people fall on hard times, they still have access to the food they need to live a healthy and full life. So where can you start? Start in your own community. Do your local or state officials know about the problem of food insecurity in your community? State officials are important people in the fight against hunger. For example, in 2019, the Oregon State Legislature voted to expand school breakfast and lunch to thousands of children who needed meals but weren't receiving them. This legislation helps the 1 in 7 families in Oregon who are food insecure and will bring meaningful change for children and families. So ask yourself, who is experiencing food insecurity in my community, and how can I listen to them? How can I help advance their priorities to make sure that everyone in my community has access to the food they need? One way to start is by working with organizations that are talking to local and state officials about hunger in your community, and to support legislation that improves the social safety net. You can also educate members of your school, faith congregation, and even friend groups about what you have learned from this video. Or write an op-ed in your local paper about why ending food insecurity is important. Finally, don't forget that Congress plays an important role in crafting and funding the safety net. Call, write, or visit your member of Congress and make sure they are doing their best to end food insecurity. Influencing public policy is crucial to strengthening food security. So don't be intimidated. Elected officials are supposed to listen to you. It's their job. And if you aren't educating them about U.S. food insecurity and how to solve it, who will?